Welcome back to FastGadgets. So today I thought I would talk a little bit about Linux, and this is going to be a bit of a ramble, so it's just me talking about things in Linux that I like and things I dislike, if I can think of any. I am a little biased towards Linux, I'll admit, but really, any topic is a possibility, so if I do go off topic and I'm not talking about Linux, well, that's because this is a kind of free-form ramble. So anyway, I was booting up my Linux Fedora 25 distribution, so I have a dual boot set up on my Yoga 910, and it was really interesting when it booted up. It froze on the KDE logo, and I couldn't do anything, but I could press, of course, Control-Alt F2 and F3, and I could go to console only, and I was able to actually get the system to allow me to log in there, and I initiated a shutdown, and there were some processes that were hanging, so I issued a couple more Control-Alt deletes, and with Fedora 25, if it detects more than 7 Control-Alt deletes within 2 seconds, it immediately trying to shut down. And when it did try to do that, Watchdog Manager process got hung, and I couldn't get it to shut down. And I was a little worried my partitions were going to become scrambled again, and I was going to have to do some work to get things going. But luckily, after I powered the system off and brought it back up, everything came back up, so I decided I probably should be doing updates, and when I looked, I saw I actually had 632 new updates, so I could use KDE to do the updates, but I'm not a really big fan of using the GUI, and I have had it fail before, so I usually just run DNF update, and very interesting how many updates I have, and it's been a while. It's been a minute since I've done my updates, so I actually had quite a few. But I am astonished. I mean, when I say it's been a while, what I mean to say is it's been about a month. So this system, it's not like this Yoga 910 is that old. I just installed the operating system on it, so I was really surprised to see that. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'm hoping that with Fedora 25's updates, I would get version 5.9 of KDE Plasma. And unfortunately I didn't, but that's alright. It is going to be updated to 5.8.6, so, with any luck, some of those bugs that I was experiencing might go away. So I'm doing updates right now while I'm talking and recording, so we're going to see how this goes. And interesting point there, I was booted into Windows 10 because I was using the system as a tablet when I was at work yesterday. And when I powered the system back up, because it was in hibernate mode, of course I went into Windows 10, and it told me, if you're going to shut down or reboot, we have to do updates. So I did get held hostage for about 20 minutes while Windows 10 did their updates, and you may hear me kvetch every once in a while about the Windows 10 update process, wherein with Linux here, of course, I'm doing the update. I can just go ahead and do those while I'm doing things. Of course, it is possible something might happen to my video stream, and it does look like at least one program here just ran into a problem. So hopefully things will keep recording. I guess we're going to find out. I don't think there's a Voco Screen update, which is the program I use to record with. Something I wanted to talk about. So I have decided that the best desktop interface for me is KDE Plasma. And there's a couple of reasons. To you, they may not seem very big and somewhat trivial, but these are my reasons. The first reason is KDE Plasma does hands down the best job of scaling the interface for high DPI displays. So this new computer I got has a 4K display in it, and I want to run it in the 4K resolution. It is beautiful to look at. It's incredibly sharp, and with my MacBook Pro I bought earlier this fall, which is the Retina MacBook Pro 2015, I thought that was incredibly sharp. My previous system, the Yoga 2 Lenovo, had a 3200 by 1800 resolution, and it was really sharp. This system is incredibly sharp, and I absolutely love it. So I really wanted to get the best look that I could, and what I found was that most of the apps will scale correctly in KDE straight out of the gate. Now, with that, there is a caveat, because you do have to go into the system settings, and it doesn't scale by default. It's actually up to you to go to display and monitor and do the scaling yourself. So that part you do have to do. And in my experience, you can see here I've got a scale setting of 3, and then there's 2, and then there's 1. There are fractional or decimal points, I should say, so you could do like 1.2 if you wanted to, but at least with the 2 Lenovo systems I've used, it has not worked. So my experience has been you can do a scale of 1, 2, or 3, and usually I just do that, and then if I can remember where it is, I make changes in the font settings and scale the DPI of the fonts. So if I want them just slightly smaller or just slightly larger, I can do that, and they still look pretty good. I mean, I should say excellent. Quite frankly, when I'm booted into Windows or I'm booted into Linux, the display looks beautiful and crisp and just so gorgeous, and my eyes aren't that great. So when I have this 4K display up, I can see the text so well, and it's so clean. And then I look at the Mac, and honestly, I'm disappointed. And I have to say, with this Yoga 910, the screen is definitely one of the major reasons that I bought this. I didn't realize how important it would be until I set those two computers side by side, and I realized how dependent I am, because of my eyes, to actually see that text so clear. So I really like it. Anyway, back to KDE Plasma. So I decided I would use KDE Plasma, and the number one reason was because the applications scale nearly perfectly. There's a few that don't. So if I run, and this is not open source, but if I run Steam, give you an idea of a non-scaling app. Here's an app that really fails when it comes to proper scaling. And it's not the end of the world. If for Steam, what I usually do is I boot into Windows, or I use my Mac to select the games I want to buy and do my shopping there, and then I can just go to my library here in Steam and launch whatever game, and then the game will come up, and its resolution will usually be determined by whatever factors the Steam games use. So they detect the hardware, I believe, and probably the operating system, and then determine what the best resolution is for playability for that game. So for the few limited games that I've used, it seems to work pretty well for me. But that's a wee bit of a problem. So it's got a new Steam runtime it wants me to have installed. Probably shouldn't be doing that while I'm doing my updates and recording video, but hey, if this computer can't multitask, what good is it? The other thing with regard to KDE, I've also decided I used to really go in and tweak all the settings and make all kinds of huge changes to KDE. And I decided I'm not going to bother doing that. Okay, so it says, oops, sorry, but I can't actually read that message. I would have to pick up the computer, bring it close to my face, or turn on the magnifier. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about that right now. If it does have a runtime update it needs to do, I'll do it later. So I can see my library, which, honestly is more than good enough for me. And I noticed that it doesn't have all my games in it. It only has the games that are Linux. So that's cool, and that works fine. I did get a chance to test Left 4 Dead, and it ran great. Okay, didn't run great. There was some hesitation, but this is, after all, a Yoga i910 Ultrabook, and it has the Intel HD 620 graphics, but it is not the graphics chipset. If I dual boot and go into Windows works great. So Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 play perfectly fine. I know they're not too graphically intensive compared to some games today, but they do play fine, and I have a good time playing them. So I still, to some extent use Windows 10. Anyway, back to KDE Plasma. So I really feel like, I did all that work to get everything set up the way I wanted to, and then on a whim I decided, it's time for me to get a new machine, an Intel-based PC, and I wanted to give my old computer to my son, so I gave my son the old computer, got this one, and set it all up, and I thought, wow, when I went and set up KDE Plasma, it took a lot of work, and I'm not sure I liked it any better or worse than it was before. Now, I have quite a few people saying, well, KDE isn't very attractive at all, or actually any of the Linux desktops, but I've found that I really do like the look of KDE. I like the semi-transparent menus. I like the font, and initially I actually did not like the widgets too awful much. There we go. So the, minimize, restore, close widgets, but I started thinking, what? It's kind of funny. They look a lot like the Windows widgets. So I found it interesting that KDE, really it is a little bit like, well, it's a lot like Windows. And I think that GNOME is more like Mac. If you were to ask me which interface I like better, I can tell you I like GNOME better. But because of the scaling issues, right now it just doesn't work for me. One of my apps that I use quite frequently are the Kdenlive video editor, which is a KDE app, and as you can imagine, it looks and works best in KDE. If I try to run it in GNOME, it will run fine, but it's missing some of the widgets, and the scaling is definitely incorrect. It's a big mess. So I have to set the display for 1080p, which is what I usually do when I'm in GNOME. I set it for 1080p, and then I use 4K when I'm here in KDE. The one detractor that I have for KDE that I don't like is it apparently doesn't know, see, or understand about the position sensors for the screen. So if I want to go into tablet mode, it really doesn't know anything about that. It doesn't disable the keyboard, which honestly I don't even know if GNOME does that. If I want to put it in tent mode so that the camera's on the top like I do in Windows, so that when I shoot a video, you're not looking at what I have nicknamed the belly cam. I've heard people call it the chin cam, but I call it the belly cam because basically it shows my belly and a little bit of my chin. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious, but of course everybody knows on the Yoga 910 the camera is on the very bottom, so it's serviceable. But when I really want to shoot a video and I'm going to have the camera up at the same time, I go ahead and flip it over and put it in tent mode, and that works great in Windows, and I think it would work great in GNOME. But I have yet to find any support for the positioning sensors so that it will flip the screen for me and all that good stuff. So I can manually do it just like I had to manually do the scaling. Unfortunately, I don't want to have to manually do it. I suppose it's possible. I mean, I could rotate the screen and then just simply put it in tent mode, and then when I'm done, go back and rotate the screen. That might not be too bad. I'll give it a try at some point. But then we have the problem of I don't have a keyboard. When I'm in Windows 10 or I'm in GNOME, I do have a software-based keyboard, and I'm not saying KDE doesn't have one. It very possibly might. I'll have to dig into it a little bit more and find out. So that's also a possibility. But yeah, I just don't see a point in going ahead and doing all the work on beautifying Linux to what I want, because at any given time, I might get a new system, I might do a risky update, I might decide to change to a different version of Fedora and not do an upgrade and just install it clean. And I actually do like, let's see what our denial was. Now I'm running in permissive mode, so everything should have ran anyway, which I'm sure it did. On a device. Not sure what it was trying to do there. So the one thing I did change was the wallpaper. I put something different on the background, and I'm happy with it. I really like the look. I like the color. I like how fresh it is. And I think I'll just save myself the time and effort of making changes to KDE and just go with what I've got. Now, speaking of updates, I have had some people say in the comments, in response to me saying, by the way, you can run updates and you don't even have to reboot. And this is in Linux, and users have said, no, you do have to reboot. Well, that's a yes and no thing. Yes, you do have to reboot because, of course, some of the packages are not going to be loaded, but many of the packages are loaded and restarted if they're able to do that. Now, kernel, of course, is not going to be one of those. A lot of the KDE Plasma packages, of course, aren't going to be able to be reloaded. A graphical application I'm using is not likely to, well, it isn't. It just isn't going to get a reload until I close it and open it again. So yes, there are some packages, and I'm well aware of that would not get updated until, of course, I did a full reboot. But the fact is, I can choose that time. I choose the reboot. Now, with Windows 10, they have made some changes that make reboots much easier on your schedule, so you can schedule a time when you do not want reboots, which I think was a cool idea. And there's another release of Windows on its way coming up that will make that even better, in that you can postpone updates. So that'll also help out. But overall, I think since I spend most of my time in Linux, it's really not a big concern for me. And I found there's essentially a couple of reasons why I might be in Windows. One is to play a game, and just like we all talked about, well, we want to play a game, we're probably going to do it in Windows because it's optimized for those particular games and it runs best. So there's still a need for Windows. Number two, I might be supporting Windows specific software for my job and recording a video for the students or for other staff. So I have to be able to run the software that the students are running when I'm doing the courses that I'm teaching and possibly training that I might do. But overall, I spend most of my time in Linux, and it does what I need it to do. Alright, well, I've got my updates installed. I don't want to ramble too long and drive you guys crazy, besides which, I got a reboot to do. But, got my 800 megabytes of updates. Let's be honest, it's basically an all-new operating system. I mean, that's the one thing that amazes me about updates on any operating system you do. Given a few updates, you've basically replaced the entire operating system for the most part. So, got my updates. I do believe I'm going to issue a reboot here and let those few updates that are not yet running get loaded. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on Fast Gadgets.